Now, step number 4 is how long did it actually take to execute? So we go to our report. Again, we're bringing in some variables and taking a look now. Let's see how I can best show this to you. Um, you can see that we are stopping our stopwatch. So to do that, we actually say we want to cast the variable stopwatch as a stopwatch class. And then we have a lot of variables, exec time 1, exec time 10. Really, that's not correct, but the exec time 1, exec time 2, exec time 3. We take whatever the value of the counter is. Okay, so let's talk about what the counter is. Come back up. Look at the sequence container itself. Sorry, this is a for loop. I said it was a sequence. It's a for loop. In the for loop, take a look at what our expressions are. We say that the value of the counter is set to 0. So that's our user variable, right? So this is a user variable counter. So we assign it to be 0 at the outset. It is finished when it is equal to 10 or less than 10 rather, because we assigned it 0. So the number of iterations is another user variable that's set to 10. And then we just increment by 1 each time. So let's look at our variables just to remind us what we have. So we start that as 0. We say how many times we want to loop through, which it's set to 10. Okay? And then it starts at 0. And so during the 0 iteration, it's going to store the elapsed time in exec time 0. In the 5th iteration, for example, it's going to store the elapsed time in exec time 5. There was a more elegant way to do this. However, this worked. It was quick to do, and I think everybody could understand it without too much fuss. So when we go back over here to the report, and you see this in the code, it looks perhaps a little goofy to say I want to store which counter. I want to take the exact time and whatever the value of the counter is. So if I'm on 0, then it's going to use exact time underscore 0. If I'm on the 5th iteration, it's going to say exact time underscore 4. 5 minus 1 because I'm doing a 0 based. I know. This kind of code is difficult to show on video. It's harder to do. And then I assign the value. This is how you dynamically choose which variable you want to use. And I say the elapsed milliseconds in our stopwatch. Okay, so I've already stopped the stopwatch up here. Okay, and that's how the elapsed time gets reported. Now probably one of the trickier steps of the 5 steps is writing this into the Excel spreadsheet. In the audit, what we're doing something actually quite unusual. We don't really have a data source. We're not getting data from SQL Server. We're not getting data from Excel. We have variables, and we want to write the value of the variables into the Excel spreadsheet. So to do that, you can use a script component. And for my script component, I chose to make it a source. So when you drag a script component, let's close this out here. Let me get my tasks here. Sorry, my toolbox. Choose the wrong one. Where's my toolbox? Where are you? So when you drag over the data flow transformation for a script component, it asks you, do you want this to be a source, a destination, or a transformation? And I chose a source. When you define the source, you go to the inputs and outputs, and you specifically define which columns you want to be made in the output. So I made 3 columns available: task description, iteration, and execution time in milliseconds. And I created these with the proper data types. In my script, what did I choose here? I chose Visual Basic. I brought my variables in. And in the Create New Output rows, I then simply said for the task description row, I'm adding a row. For the value of the task description row, I take the value of the variable task description. Okay? Oops, it's covered that up, sorry. For the value of the iteration row, I take the value of the counter plus 1. And I do plus 1 because remember counter starts at 0. And so if I want it to be 1 through 10, this being the first run, then I 0 plus 1. And then depending on which counter it is, if I'm on the 0 counter, I take the execution time in milliseconds and I make that equal to the exec time 0. So I use simply a switch, a select case over here. And that's really it. And by the way, your Excel destination just has to open it up and say okay because it thought that I messed something up. This is the tricky part of all of this audit. It's the part that will mess you up most playing around. And I can zoom in. But every one of these is just like that. And so here's what you can do. You can actually copy and paste these in here. You can use these to build more. If you had another Transact SQL test that you wanted to do, all you'd have to do is just say copy, paste it in your for loop, and now change whatever properties about it that you needed to. So bring it up here. So now it comes after this. And so what I would do now is I would change my name. So T-SQL open row set, let's say. And then I would take that name and I would go to my start timer and I would change my script and I would come down here and I'd say, okay, the task description is the open row set, because this value, the value of the task description variable, is what gets sent to Excel. And then I would come down here to my execute SQL task and I would change my script and I'd say insert dbo.load this table, select all from open row set, and put in whatever you needed to. Okay, get your syntax, get your code right. And then here's one final thing that you have to do to make this your own. Every time that you copy this data flow task, it's going to error out. See, if I try to run this right now, it's going to give me a failure here once it goes through all the validation. And it's just a bug probably. Double click on your audit. Double click on your script component. Click the edit script and close it. Just click it and close and say okay, and it goes away. Right? Just a little bug maybe. Whatever, I don't know, but that's it. Now you'd be able to execute this for loop. You could just right click and say execute that container, and now it will add that, it will append to your Excel spreadsheet. And so if we expand this, you can see that it is actually going through. It's just iterating through. How many times? 10 times, because we said here iterate 10 times. So I don't know how many it is on now, but it has finished. And if we go back to our Excel spreadsheet now, down here at the bottom, you can see it did add those in. Okay. So I hope you can use this to do your own bulk loads. I have tried to make this flexible enough to where just about anybody could use it. However, this is some complex stuff. So take your time. Don't be in a hurry. Watch this in the previous video and come up with your own. Use your own text files. That's going to require you coming up with different data flows. You're going to have to go to the data flow tasks. You're going to have to rip out my data flow. You're going to have to add your own, and then you'd be able to test it. But your table prep, your start timer, report, and audit, those should all stay fairly static. The bulk of the work is just by changing that third step of loading the data. That's where you're going to spend most of your time changing this particular design pattern. So good luck. I hope that this helps you make some good decisions someday.